Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. My name is Paul McCartney, and for 30 years I served with Essex Police. During that time, I interviewed suspects for murders, rapes, extortions and violent crimes. Now, I interview former members of the police and military and others who have done exceptional things in their lives. Sit back and listen to X Job Downloaded. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul McCartney and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Dr. Bob Sherwood. Now, Bob was a member of the Metropolitan Police and he's now a historian specialising in the Holocaust. Have I got that right, sir?
That's correct, you have.
So, Bob, where did it all begin for you and what was your inspiration to join the police?
My father was in the police service. I just mentioned his age. Thankfully, he's still with us at 96. He joined the job he comes from Berkshire, both my parents do. And he joined the Metropolitan Police in 1946, I think it was, just after war service. And he caught the latter end of the war. And he was stationed in the East End, where I was born, with two sisters, one either side. I'm 17 next week. Sadly, my elder sister died 10 years ago, 12 years ago. My younger sister's 2 years younger. So I was from a police family. We lived in a police road in northeast London, Chingford, where I went to school at the same one that David Beckham went to, a primary school. And then I think because he did it and he was successful, he reached Chief Inspector. I got to know his friends, his colleagues, because we lived in a police road. So it became the natural progression. So I joined in 1971, the cadets, and then progressed to the job proper in 73.
Fantastic. So where was he stationed in East London?
My dad, oh God, a lot of places: Arbour Square, Limehouse, Walthamstow, Hackney. He did G and H and J. You're Essex, aren't you?
I'm ex-Essex, but
Yeah.
Here's the thing. My dad's uncle was a Metropolitan Police Officer, joined in 36.
Mm-hmm.
He was at Leytonstone.
Right.
And then he joined the army, war service.
Yeah.
Went to Normandy and then came back and went back to Leytonstone. You're a cadet in 1971.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan Police was a completely different place then. And I suppose Hendon would have been your training school.
Yeah.
What was that like going through the doors? 1971, we're just coming out of the swinging 60s.
Yeah.
What was that like as a kid going to Hendon?
My dad didn't tell me a lot about it. He didn't say you got to join the police, nor did he put me off joining the police. He let me make my mind up on that. And when I went in there, I thought, what the hell have I done? Because I can remember the first night, after the parents dropped me off on a Sunday and then we'll say goodbye. And most of us were southern-based kids. We were left stranded in these dormitories and we all got herded into a dormitory at the end of the corridor. If you've been to Hendon, Paul, have you seen the cadet school? You've seen the setup there?
Yes.
And the murder squad officers in the end. We all got put into this dormitory and then some form of initiation ceremony took place. And it wasn't anything nasty. It really wasn't. It wasn't, vicious. It wasn't bullying. And the idea was, and the instructors knew, was basically you're now out of school, you've got to stand on your own 2 feet, and this is what happens. And it was very military as well. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And I thought, what the hell is this? But I always felt, and a friend of mine who did the cadets with me and survived 30 years in the job, who came out as a sergeant in traffic, a couple of weeks ago said to me he nearly put his papers in. He resigned from the cadets because he didn't feel he fitted, but he did, thankfully. I was fortunate. My dad was a chief inspector. I was local. And I didn't think I was completely dim, although some were a lot cleverer than me there because I didn't have many O-levels then. Still now I haven't. And also I could play football a bit. And I think if you're good at a sport, going to any organisation such as that, it's a great help. You remember at school, the kids who are good at football or rugby or whatnot, or the girls who are good at hockey, tend to get left alone pretty much. They didn't get bullied, did they? They
No.
looked, and I think that I could kick. Oh, I wasn't David Beckham level, but I could play a bit. And so I really felt quite easy there. And yeah, it was very, very enjoyable. And the similar thing, the setup was 4 houses named after former commissioners from the 1800s, Maine, Trenchard. Trenchard's, of course, 20th century, isn't it? Trenchard, Maine, Fielding, and Rowan, who were 4 former commissioners. And we did a lot of physical work, we did drill, and we did academic work, and we went on camps and so on. And my son, 20 odd years later, in 2005, joined the Army cadets, a foundation college. You're ex-military, aren't you?
No, I'm not. My dad was military, so okay. I didn't know.
You understand the system. He went to Harrogate and did exactly the same as what I did. 30 odd years later, and he went off to war. I didn't. But the setup was the same. 4 houses, competitive, and it was just pretty much identical. And our system was devised by an ex-colonel, a Colonel Croft, who was a DSO. And a lot of the guys who taught us, a lot of the drill sergeants were ex-military, and they were from the Grenadier Guards and so on. So it's just like being in the army, really. And you either like it or you don't. And I liked it. So
yeah, absolutely. I loved training school. I wasn't a cadet. As I say, my dad was in the army. Then he joined the police. But I actually enjoyed being away. We went to Ashford. Yep. When you got to, you've gone there in 1971, and as we say, the world was completely different then. Was your dad still serving?
Oh yeah, he retired in 76.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he was. He was still serving. And I wasn't the only one. The commander of the cadet school's son was in the same house as me. So, and it was quite common to have policemen's sons. And there's no, I say the daughters because there was not any female cadets then. There wasn't any. It was all men, all guys. And I was one of several who had police officer fathers and the cadet school. It was inevitable that was going to happen, because that does happen, doesn't it? Families follow your one as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. My brother joined as well. When you joined, and I don't know what it was like in the Met, but in Essex, we still had the women's police service at that time. So they had, they ran separate service.
They did. They had, I think they worked 7 hours instead of 8, and they got 7/8 of the pay, and they weren't on the shift. They dealt with prostitutes, women, and things like that, and children and so on. Yeah. When I joined, until 75, but it changed. I think it was. Yeah,
and they had a different pension scheme as well.
I think they did.
Which had to be brought up to date so that there was an equal pension at the conclusion of their service. But it's fascinating, and this is recent history, isn't it? We're not talking hundreds of years ago. No. This is what. Where did you go to after you've done your cadet training? Were you assigned to a borough?
No. Yeah, in those days, in the early 70s, there was 3 phases of cadet training. The first phase was at Hendon. Everyone started there, mostly. Then there was a second phase, which was Ashford, as you went to. Yep. That was a big training school there. I missed out on that because I was doing A-levels, which I failed. And I caught up in the end, I think. And then you went to a third phase, which was one of 4 cadet centres scattered around London. And I'm trying to remember the 4 of them. It was Kingsbury, Wanstead, Kingsbury being northeast London, Wanstead being, of course, on the borders of Essex.
Yeah.
I think the other one was Hayes, somewhere down at southeast, and then Sunbury on Thames, which is where I went, because and each of the centres had a football emphasis or a sports emphasis.
Yes.
Because I played football, I went to Sunbury, which is quite handy because I lived at Staines, where I live now, so it was about 5 miles away on the bus, so it was quite easy for me. That was good. And from there, you went to a police station. They posted you to a police station when you weren't doing physical work, and I went to Rochester Row.
Wow.
Which is opposite an army barracks. And it was a great eye-opener, and all I did was play football most of the time, because I turned up there, the chief inspector was the secretary of the Met Police Football Association. When police sport then, as you know, Paul, was a big thing in those days, wasn't it? It was a big thing. Sadly, it's not now, I gather, but it was then. It was a big, and he knew I was the cadet corps centre half, so that was it. I just played football for the cadet corps. I played for Sunbury. I played for Rochester Row, played for A Division. So 3 or 4 days a week I was playing football. So I didn't actually do any real police work. But it was good fun. I wasn't there very long. It was good fun, and then off to training school.
Because
February
Rochester
73.
Row is opposite there's a theatre near there, isn't there? If I remember rightly, near Rochester Row, and London District, which is the army barracks.
It is right opposite, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been there since, and I think it was a military police barracks as well, because when I did a CRD course, one of the guys in our class who was ex-military took us to the army barracks. That's right, he did, because that's a good place to go. Yeah, so that's where I went as a cadet. But I did realise that in those days, A Division, as it was, Rochester Row, Cannon Row, particularly, if you were a PC there, you spent the bulk of your time standing outside number 10 or Buckingham Palace or Fixed Points, and the police work didn't really exist. So I thought, I'm not going to apply for that. And when you get to training school, then you had the option of 3 divisions, as they were then. You could nominate 3 divisions you wanted to go to, and I nominated the one I got, which was F Division.
And what's F Division? What area does that?
Hammersmith, Shepherd's Bush, and Fulham. Training school in February 73. It's my birthday's in 3 weeks' time, and I went to apply for F. Now I was earmarked to go to Hammersmith. Again, it was football. The guy who ran the Hammersmith football team and the divisional team, Scotsman, sadly not with us anymore. He knew the footballers coming through. He knew the cadet corps players. He knew me. And he had a friend at the training school doing the postings. You know how the job worked in them days, Paul. That and how it was. It's how it worked. Nothing wrong with it. He wanted me at Hammersmith because he wanted a centre half. But unbeknown to him, an uncle of mine, a distant uncle of mine, was the chief superintendent there. So he said, no, I don't want my nephew coming to the same police station as me. So I went to Shepherd's Bush instead, which was great. It was great. It was lovely.
I interviewed a man by the name of Alan Evershed, who retired as a chief superintendent from the Met, and he was a cadet in the mid to late 50s, and we were talking about football. And the fact is that the camaraderie that came out of force sport was second to none.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sport was important, team sport in particular, and you play against players with players from other divisions, and you get to know them. You see that at the professional game, don't you? Watch the end of a match, and them they don't come off with their teams. They're often coming off with a player from the other side, talking away because they know each other. They played against each other, and it was a great level. It really was, and it was very, very good. So football did me a world of good.
How long did you spend in the borough, in that particular borough?
Shepherd's Bush. I was a PC, TDC, which was a temporary detective constable, and a detective constable, all in Shepherd's Bush, for about 5 or 6 years, I think it was. And then I took promotion.
And people will or may not realise actually that was the epicenter of the British television. BBC was at Shepherd's Bush, so you had everything going on there. It's a very, very diverse location as well. What was it like working within the police station there at that time?
Well, it was interesting because it was only 6-7 years earlier that 3 policemen got murdered in Shepherd's Bush, Harry Roberts, etc.
Yes.
And a lot of the officers at the Bush at the time had been there many years and were there and knew the officers and had some involvement. And it was always an issue there, the fact that was the police station. The plaque I don't know whether this does, I think the police station, I saw it a couple of weeks back, boarded up now, it's going to be flat, sadly. There was a plaque in the front office, which was very, very important because a lot of the guys, particularly the PCs, spent 20, 30 years in a police station then, as you know, and to them that was quite an important thing. And that particular day in August was always quite a sad day, and there used to be a ceremony outside where it took place. There's now Michael Winner, he did those plaques, didn't he? When one of those was unearthed, if you wish, some years back. So it was that was quite important. And also it was lively because Queen's Park Rangers, who were on Shepherd's Bush, had just got promotion to the first division, and they were a very good team at that day, and 76 I think they came runners up in the first division. So, and that was a bit of a shock because they hadn't been in that level for years. And I do clearly remember the magistrates, we used to get the yobs from Leeds and whatnot, and the 70s football wise for crowds were quite dangerous, and there was a lot of yobs. It's far worse than it is now, I would say. The policing was different, and we'd take these yobs in front of the court and they'll get fined and whatnot. And then the magistrate said, I've had enough of this. From now on, it's going to be sentencing. So the next game against Leeds, or whatever it was, about 12 of them got nicked, all juveniles. So he lined them all up. He got the doctor, happened to be the QPR doctor, and a police doctor in one, Chester Mall, he went tap, tap, tap on the knees. You're fit, right. 3 months DC, 3 months D, 3 months DC, whole lot. Killed it overnight. Stopped it overnight. You couldn't do that now, but it was interesting. And that was a great leveler as well. Just going to a place like that with a mixture, diverse mixture of it's an Irish area. There's a lot of Afro-Caribbeans in there many years. There was an Asian population. There was Eastern European population who have gradually crept in, gradually bought properties there as well. So it was a complete mix, completely different from where I come from and where I live, where it's 99% white people. There was a diverse mixture. That was a good learner. It's a good learner. Good learner.
White City at one point was the area where the Olympics was held, if I remember rightly.
No, the Commonwealth Games or Empire Games. I think it was the Empire Games. It was held, and all the houses are named after parts of the Commonwealth or the Empire. The stadium is not there anymore. It's part of the BBC, but it was there at the time.
Yeah. It's fascinating because, like I say, we're talking about a bygone era, but some people would think that diversity is a new phenomena, but it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not within the police service,
no,
whatever.
No, it's not. You're totally right. Yeah, in the East End, the Jewish people settled there in the late 1800s and throughout the early 1900s, and of course have moved on. So no, it's not. London is always been a diverse city, always has been, and it copes with it very well.
Absolutely. So you get promoted.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Oh God, 78, 79, something like that. And I ended up at Heathrow.
Right.
Which
at the airport.
Yeah. Yeah, Heathrow Airport. That was a good posting. And then the interchange system. Do you know what that was? Where you went from DC to PS,
right?
And then you went back to the CRD. So you got to know what the station officers were doing and how they did it. And that was good. That was very useful. And then a couple of years later, I think sometime in the early 80s, if I remember, it's 40 odd years ago, I would become a detective sergeant, went to Paddington.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about a time where Concorde was ruling the skies.
Yeah.
So you had that going through Heathrow.
Yeah, Concorde there. Yeah, 3 terminals.
Unbelievable.
3. Yeah.
And it's 5 now.
Yeah, plenty of overtime because it was paid by the BAA. So just got married, just bought a house. So yeah, 82, something like that. I just bought a house and then I went back to the CRD, 83, 84, something like that anyway. So it worked out well because when you're young and get married and get children, you need, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely. You go to Paddington. Is that Paddington or Paddington Green?
Paddington Green's the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, I went as a DS, yeah.
Anymore, is it? Paddington?
No, sadly not. Sadly, that's where we all started. That's where we all got interviewed at Paddington back in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, well, 70s we did.
Wow.
Yeah, I went past there a couple of years ago and it's all boarded up. In fact, squatters got in there and I thought, God, we used to bring terrorists in there. And
I know.
I just, breaks your heart, it does.
That was the terrorist centre of the UK. They
was
prisoners from all over the country, Paddington, to be in.
High security police station. It was great.
I wonder if they'll ever sit back and wonder what they've done when they look at the way that they've destroyed the estate. Because Baroness Casey, whatever we may think of the report, and we've all got our views, but community policing was one of the biggest parts of her reports. And we, the British Police Service, have systematically destroyed community policing by doing away with these old stations.
Yeah, and they worked. Yeah, I was at St John's Wood, I was at Paddington, and I became the DS at St John's Wood, which is a lovely little sort of station, like an island it was. And you would get people who would come in and say, look, I want to just report something or just have a word with someone. Yes, sir, what's it? How can I help you? Come in the room there. And they would tell you things. They pitch up at Paddington with a queue out the door with people signing on bail. They're not going to bother, are they? They're not going to do it. And that's so very invaluable where people can relate to their police station. There's not a policeman in the country who wouldn't agree with what we're saying there. It was. Oh no! I hate to see police stations closed down. It really breaks me up. It does, because that was important.
And that's another place, St John's Wood. You've got your cricket.
Yeah, Lords. Yeah.
Another iconic. You've worked in some very nice areas.
I have. I've worked in interesting areas. St John's Wood was great. I was the DS. Did have a DI, but they didn't need him. I had 4 DCs, one of whom became a professor, and 4 sort of trainee detectives. They temporary detective, constable, crime squad, call them what you like, Paul. It's all the same thing. Plus the beat crimes unit as well. And then we had a police station of a inspector, 4 sergeants, and about 6 or 7 PCs on each shift. We all knew each other very, very well, and it worked. You've got to be the right sort of person to work in a small station. You've got to be prepared to help each other out, and we did. Sometimes I'd take a panda out and deal with a call for them if they were short, because they'd help me out. So you go in the comms room there, and they say, "Look, we've got no one to do a death message or something. Would you do it?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." "You sure?" "Yeah, I don't mind doing it." And it's I'll still do it. You still got the skills, haven't you? You learn these things, so you go and do it. And then, of course, when you want any help, I give Bob a leg. I'll give him a left. I give him a leg. And to me, that's important.
Yeah,
you all want the same thing, and it worked. It was great.
You've got round there Abbey Road, and all the you've got some very wealthy and influential people that live there. Paul McCartney and I think Jude Law lives around there. So
you may well do. Paul McCartney's still got a house there.
Yeah.
And his dog used to go missing sometimes, and he would trot in the police station, always put some money in the police and orphans box, take the dog, and off he would go. Because the rule was, when the Japanese tourists came, "Gee, where does Paul McCartney live?" You say Abbey Road, because he didn't live in Abbey Road. He lived round the corner from Lord's, and that's what we used to do. Nicely, but they would be told, "No, he doesn't live here. He's up Abbey Road way." He doesn't want people bang on his door, his family, does he?
No. Of course, and it works well. Where did you go to from St John's Wood?
St John's Wood. I was there for about 2 or 3 years, and I ended up went to Hayes in West London very briefly, and then I was asked if I wanted to go on a child protection team, which was a new concept introduced. I'm talking now late 80s. And it was on an area basis. There was 8 areas then in London, and I think we were 6 areas. So that was Borough of Hillingdon. Was it just Hillingdon? It could have been part of X as well. So we were based at Ruislip, which wasn't too far from where I live, and that was another area. That was a mixture of working with the social services, a new concept that people think that's never going to work, because they are sometimes different viewpoint than us. We have a rigid way of, most of us have a way of doing things. They have a way of doing things. It worked very, very well. In fact, they were more extreme than we were. They would say, "Why can't you arrest him and bang him up for a week?" "Well, we can't do that. We just can't go and put someone. "Oh, sure you can." And it worked very well. Most of them were, almost all of them were extremely good, very professional and very loyal and good people. So that was a guide of that. And if you can do anything to help people getting abused, it's got to be a good thing, isn't it? Good.
And the thing was then, we didn't know that 30 years later, it would be one of the, protecting vulnerable people, adults, children, would be the mainstay of the police service. Because, they've become, the police have become the social workers, they've become the mental health practitioners and the triage team and everything else. And sometimes they don't actually get involved in what we would see as police work, dealing with burglaries and assaults and the like. When you have done your time there, how deep into investigations would you go? What types of investigations would you deal with on a child protection team?
It was physical or sexual allegations against children. And that could come from a variety of places and variety of sources, sometimes from schools, sometimes from NSPCC, sometimes from the mother, not from the father, neighbours. Anyone who made an allegation, then we would deal with it. From investigation. Sorry.
So from simple assault all the way through to murder, or would that go?
No, murder will be dealt with by a murder squad, but sexual assault, certainly rapes, incest are dealt with. It's still sexual assault, isn't it? All those types of offences and assaults as well, and it was done jointly with the social services, and there'll be various meetings and strategy meetings and protection meetings to see whether children should be removed and so on and so forth. And it was an eye-opener, it really was. Yeah,
it was. I have to say, if somebody came in and said, "Oh, I've got to take a protection out on a family, on children, things like that," it sharpens your mind a bit because you're making life changes decisions. But that's part of policing, isn't it?
Yeah.
How long did you do that for?
A couple of years, I think. And I'd passed the inspector's exam. I'd been unsuccessful on a couple of selection boards. It was suggested I went back on division to. I didn't think I needed to, frankly, but I did because they said when you're doing this work, you're not likely to get selected. You need to be back on division again or district. So I didn't think I needed to. I spent 3 years at Paddington and a year or so, a couple of years at Hayes. So I think I've been a DS for 8 years. I think I was ready. But no, I went back to division, went to Hammersmith, which is just north of Shepherd's Bush, which was great again, another great posting. And that was superb. Some terrific people, wonderful Detective Chief Inspector, Jackie Moulton, who you may know of.
Yes.
Yeah, she was the DCI, dear friend of mine. She was brilliant. She really was. And some really, really good. Probably, I worked at some good places. That was as good as anywhere I worked was Hammersmith. With some really good officers, many of whom I still see now. I think that speaks for itself. You still see them on we meet up, a lot of us meet up for a reunion every now and then. I think if you do that 30 years afterwards, that must say something for the place, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was it, Jackie, that Linda LaPlante based her Silent Witness? Was it Silent Witness?
Prime Suspect.
Prime Suspect.
Yeah. And my wife and I went to the premiere of that up in the BAFTA studios in Piccadilly when it came out. We went to the premiere, my wife and I did, and that was superb as well. She was brilliant. She was a one-off, but she's brilliant, and I still see her regularly. So, yeah, she's a great woman.
She's friends with Colin Sutton. I don't know if you've.
That's right. Yeah, I know Colin. Yeah.
Oh, do you? Because his dad was a copper, and they lived in Chingford as well, or Enfield or Chingford. I
didn't know that.
Yeah, his dad was a copper at Tottenham. But I do work with Colin on the.
Yeah, he's a good man. He's done well.
The Real Man. So I've done some stuff with him on there. So you're there. You're in Hammersmith.
Yeah.
Divisional district crimes, usual burglaries, robberies, that type of stuff.
I did, because I was at university then. I went to university when I started on the child protection team and finished off at Hammersmith. It was 4 years. I did law. It was a bachelor's degree. I spent, during the summertime, I was out on an active team because he had sort of teams in the office. Other than that, I'll be doing the crime desk or I'll be doing the crime support group. These really weary roles that DSs didn't want to do but had to. And I was quite happy to do that. So obviously people were happy with me to do it. So it worked out well because it was regular hours. It was gutty. But again, you learn because you saw the case papers coming in or the crimes coming in. Had to be done. And I quite willingly did that for my last 2 years at university. I was at Hammersmith. And it worked because I got selected for DI and I got my degree. So it worked.
So go back to your education part within the police service.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration to do a degree within the police? Because if you're a busy detective, it's pretty difficult to do.
I think it was probably because I didn't do very well at school, very badly, because I was pretty lazy, and I think a lot of people were, weren't they? And the school perhaps wasn't as good as it could have been, and didn't identify skills and talents. And I just felt, I wanted to do that. I'd passed the promotion exam, and I just fancied doing it because the opportunity was there. The police would support you financially and time, and I felt I could. And I was on a child protection team, which was predominantly 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Yes, you're on call and so on and so forth, but you could do it. So my wife said, "Do it." So I did, and I did very well. Got 2-1 honours. So.
And the degree is the degree in Holocaust history.
No. That was the law. I did law.
You did law.
First degree I did was bachelor's degrees law. I got 3. The first one was bachelor's in law.
Wow. And where did you study that?
Was Ealing College, which became Thames Valley University. A lot of policemen went there. A lot of them went there. A lot of my colleagues went there and did law. And it was good. It was really useful. I'd like to think it could have been useful for promotion, but it didn't work because I didn't get beyond DI. But, however, it did open doors. It did open doors later down the line for me. So yes, it was useful.
How are you viewed by your colleagues? Because it's very difficult, as I say, to get a degree whilst you're in the police. But how did your colleagues view the work that you were undertaking outside of the job?
They didn't mind. Do you mean as regards they resented the fact that I wasn't there all the time and was going to? Well, I had to go once or twice a week to college, and that was 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock or something. So they didn't mind because I was always available the rest of the time. Did my weekends when I had to. Never shirked anything. I didn't socialise perhaps as much as I could have done because I was conscious of going home and doing my work. I wasn't going to waste that opportunity or waste the job's money or the time because it wouldn't be fair on my family. So I never had any negative feedback because two other guys in my office at Hammersmith did it as well. So it was, and there's other people in the police did it. And that's when they started to do the Portsmouth degree, this policing degree, which some people don't think was worth a great deal, but a lot of guys did it. So the police was looking to get people to get degrees, and I just one of them took the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you do your second degree?
I did that when I retired. I did that 2012, number 2.
So you've gone through your service. You then get promoted to
DI.
Where did you go to as a DI?
Harrow Road.
Good.
Yeah, again, it was good. I had to wait a few years because of the Sheehy report, which clogged everything up. And I went to Harrow Road, which was a great station. It was on D Division, which with Paddington near it. So it was home from home near Shepherd's Bush. So I knew the area. And again, it was great. It was the jump between DS and Inspector and DI is quite significant. I always felt that the jump between PC and Sergeant has a gap. And then Sergeant to Inspector is not in uniform, but the CID gap between DC and DS is not that great, but between DS and DI is. You're a completely different level.
Yeah, it is.
So, but again, I've been in DS for 8 years, 9 years or so. The two other DIs were experienced DIs, both of whom I knew I'd worked with before that. The more you go on, the more you know people, don't you? And it was, I really enjoyed it. And then it amalgamated with Paddington, so I went back to Paddington.
Wow.
Which was good again. So yeah, I liked it. I loved it.
Yeah, I think the DI's role, I liked uniform role, but I loved my DI's role. But it is, you start to become more strategic in what you do, and you're doing more with the governors and the decisions that you make. Accepting that a uniform inspector makes decisions, but you're making decisions, or you were then, around interview strategies, investigations, making sure that the CPS were playing ball and keeping on top of that, which was a challenge in itself, because when we started going to the CPS to get charging advice, I often found myself arguing with them about, well, basically saying, if you let this person go and they commit crime, I've got it all written down that you said that you're not going to charge them. And it was pretty full on at times. What year did you retire?
2003.
2003. Wow. So you've had 20 years outside of the job now. How did you find that, having been a cadet and you spent your whole life within the police, one way or another, lived in police houses and
my dad and so on. I thought it would be difficult, but it wasn't. I went to work for a company called Smart Water, which is a property marketing company based in Telford. I said I wouldn't do more than 30 because I thought, no, I'm young enough to start something else, and I didn't want to be one of these guys who drags on 25, 35, 40 years. How long did you do, Paul?
30, yeah.
30, yeah, and I felt, no, 30 years would do. So I applied for several jobs. There was plenty around, and saw this job. A pal of mine saw it in the job paper, the Metropolitan Police job paper. Went for it. Some crime prevention officer phoned me up from somewhere in the East End, said, I'm going for that. You won't get it. I'm going to get it. Oh, yeah. He said, yeah, I've heard you've gone for it, because he knew the people, because it was a crime prevention substance. And he knew the people and was told, yeah, you've got a good chance of getting this. He wanted to do it on his terms as a consultant, charge them a fortune, and they weren't having that. So I went for the interview and got it. So I retired on the Sunday and started on the Monday. And that was good, because there was the guy who ran the company, is now retired, was ex-West Midlands. He was about our age. There was a guy from GMP who was been there about 6 months, who was my age as well. There was a guy from the MOD who was the brother-in-law of the owner. He was about my age as well. He had been more of a sort of a security type policeman, because the MOD are guards, aren't they? A lot of faces. Good guy. Then 2 or 3 others joined from other forces, and I was the only Met guy, but it didn't matter, and we got on very well. And I went from police on the inside to police on the outside. And of course, going around police stations was second nature because you know how to talk to them, don't you? There's a way of talking to your own colleagues, and it was pretty good. But then something better came along, and I jumped at 2 years later, went to something else, which didn't really work, I don't think. What was it now? No, that's right. But when you've retired and you've got your pension and the children had pretty much left school, one was at university, then you can be a little bit, you can take a risk, can't you? I could take a risk. And I went for work for a company up in London, which was selling a course on terrorism, an online course in terrorism. I've been on the bomb squad, and it didn't work. They changed the goalpost. They moved offices while I was there from just on the edge of the West End to the right to Old Street, which is right the other side of London.
Yeah.
And the management changed, and I thought they should have told me all this before, because this happened with a fortnight or so getting there. So I fed out with them, they fed out with me, so we decided to part company. Because policemen can be like that, can't we? We can be so, hold on, I'm not standing for this.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and I think we are fickle at times. You know, we and dare I say it, but blokes are more fickle than ladies in the police service, because we like the bright and shiny, and we want to move into the, you know, we're like magpies. Yeah. You say you were on the bomb squad?
Yeah.
How was that? What was that all about?
I was there 99, 2000, I think it was. That was brilliant. It really was. Playing in the Premiership, that was great. It was, everything's big and think big and so on. It was a great posting to have. So yeah, that was good.
And where did you work from? The yard?
From the yard.
Because I mean, terrorism was changing at that time, wasn't it? We were going from the IRA into the extreme stuff that we're seeing at the moment. What sort of stuff would you deal with on the bomb squad?
Well, the major case I was involved with others, and I don't say too much about, was Copeland, was the nail bomber, the London nail bomber.
Right, okay.
I was there when that happened, and we worked so ruddy hard, and it was great police work done, and we got a result. We got him nicked, and he did three bombs, and people died. Eventually got arrested, and I think the whole operation was so smooth, and the commitment was just second to none. Blokes were sleeping under desks, and you know, we were absolutely exhausted. But we were determined to catch this guy, and we did. We had help from all over the country, and it was terrific to be involved in something like that. It really was. And
that was at the Admiral Duncan, if I remember.
That's correct, in Old Compton Street.
Old Compton Street.
Old Compton Street, yeah.
Was it Brick Lane as well?
Brick Lane and Brixton Market.
Brixton Market, yeah.
Yeah, and it was terrific to see how it operated and so on, and that was a very much a high point in my career for professionally to see and be involved in something like that.
Yeah, as you say, people died as a result of his actions. Yeah. White Wolves or something similar.
He was just a lone wolf, really. He was a member of some extreme right-wing fascist groups, but he was predominantly a lone wolf.
Yeah.
We looked into all the organisations as well, so it was a really thorough professional job, and it was terrific to be involved in that. It really was.
I have a friend who I do the tower with, who was the service desk assistant in Brick Lane when the bomb went off, because it's right by the police station. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I went down there. Yeah, down there, right by the police station. Yeah, on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah. It was meant for, I think it was probably meant for Petticoat Lane Market, which of course was Sunday. Yeah.
And he dumped it there, and someone picked it up, and it went off. And thankfully, no one got injured at that one.
No. Well, that's fascinating. So you've done your time. You're working in the external industries, etc. You're now doing your second degree. So what is your second?
I didn't start that till 2012.
Right.
And that came about because after I'd left Smartwater, I went to a company where we decided to part company amicably. Then I worked for a company that managed sort of police operations and medical emergency services type things, because it's cheaper to get an ex-policeman to do something than it is a current policeman.
Yes.
And this company recognised that, so they used to have doctors, education, not firemen, and policemen. And it was based in London and in Hampshire. A friend of mine was the sort of the general manager for it, and he invited me for an interview. I went through the process, got it, and I ran a couple of projects for them. One was a project in Wales where every allegation of physical or sexual abuse against children in schools was reinvestigated by this company who got the contract. And we had a lot of ex-policemen from South Wales, and North Wales, and I managed it from Hampshire and then London when the office moved to London. And also I ran a typing project, and Essex Police was one of the customers we had, so I used to go to Chelmsford regularly.
Yeah.
Lady that I can't remember her name, had an MBE, really nice lady. They were really nice, and because it's like transcribing interviews, it was a bloody nightmare, time consuming. So we employed typists. A lot of them were ex-job typists, quite happy to work from home. Gave them the machines, the old machine, and they transcribed it. And I did that for 3 or 4 years, and eventually something else bigger came along, and I thought I can take a risk. I can do that, so I did. And that was good. That was, again, working with your own. A couple of 3 ex-Met guys, a couple of guys from Hampshire, a bloke from the city, all good guys. So that was good. So I was lucky there. Then one of the former owners phoned me up and offered me a job near home, running a medical team that was, when they're short of doctors, they would contact one of the agencies. It still happens now, of course. And the agency would put someone in. And I did that for a little while. And then the goalposts changed on that. They got taken over. And if you get a takeover, you have 2 people for one job because you've got 2 companies doing one. So me and many others who were coming at the same time got made redundant. And that was 2011. And my wife said, we've got to do something. So, how old was I then? 58, something like that. So I started working for myself doing insurance investigations. Don't do it. Other blokes have done it. And have you heard other blokes tell us about this? Yeah, you have. It is bloody hard work.
You fight for every penny, and it doesn't matter whether you're a DC, a DS, a detective chief superintendent. It doesn't matter. You've got to fight hard to win the business and to get money out of these people.
Yeah, because that's not good enough, do it again, and so on. And used to go to London with 3 addresses of accidents that happened, see these people, and a lot of them were on the fiddle and they were using somebody else's card. Might be back in the job without a warrant card.
Yeah.
And you easily get to see them. It will take, if you've got a train at 8 o'clock and you got them about 6, that'll cost you 20 quid for a train or a travel card. Before I could get it cheaper through because of your age. Then you'd write all the reports up. You'd probably do 3 jobs in 2 days for 150 quid, 75 quid a day. Not worth it, Paul. So, and then by luck, 2012, my wife said to me, her cousin was an academic, said, tell me to go back to university. I said, no, I don't want to do that. 60 nearly, I don't want to do that. She said, have a look. So she Googled it for me. And Royal Holloway University, which is about 5 miles from here, does a course in Holocaust studies, part-time or full-time, evening classes. She said, do that. We can afford it. I said, no, I don't want to do that. Because I've always been interested in the Holocaust, always have been, and Israel and so on. And so I did. And I fell on my feet there doing that. And in fact, the day after I went back to university, I got offered a job. I was the safety officer at our local football club. The owner of the football club had a electrical and a mechanical plumber business locally. Needed a health and safety manager because health and safety on building sites had improved, and it got to the days you used to see the Irish guy standing on the corner with flip-flops. They've gone, it's the old days of that. You used to see it when you were younger, and so did I.
Yeah.
Those days have gone. Turn out a transit van, work hard and get paid, and where they go. Those days have gone. It's far more regulated. He needed someone to regulate the sites and make sure people did this, did the courses, had the right equipment, and he couldn't do it himself. So they thought they'd get someone, and I went for an interview, and I knew the people. They said one day a week, we just give you a trial for 3 months. I was there for 7 years, and that really fitted in well. I did more than one day, became 2 and 3, and I started at university in 2012 September, Holocaust Studies, and it worked. It did work. It clicked, and I got a merit for my master's degree and a distinction for my dissertation, which I did comparing the United Kingdom war crimes team at the end of the war, Nuremberg and all that, to the American teams, because I went to the States twice. You can get all this funding if you know how to do it. I went to the museums out there. My wife found a museum for me where a guy there had been part of a special unit in America, which no one in England had ever heard of, and that is worth millions to not millions, worth a lot to a historian, because you find out new things and write a book and you put it in there. That's what people want to hear. And when I told my professor that, he said, oh, no, that's brilliant. I never heard of that. And he was world renowned, this guy, sadly dead. So I did that, got that. And then he said to me, this professor, why don't you do a doctorate? I said, don't be silly. He said, no, we need someone to do something on the war crimes team at the end of the Second World War. And you're the person to do it. You're a policeman, you've got a law degree, and you've done the Holocaust studies course. So I did, and got it. Got a doctorate, and went all around the world. And yeah, it was very. Sadly, he passed away very shortly after I started. Very sadly, but the people at Royal Holloway were wonderful, so I was very fortunate to do that.
So, how did your interest in the Holocaust and Israel? How did that all come about?
How did it start? It started. I think it was 1967. We moved from the East End to here to Staines, and June 1967 was when the 6-Day War took place, if you remember. There's a lad in our class, an Arabic lad who was called Abdul. Whether it was his real name, I don't know. And I hope I'm not being rude, but that's the way he was called.
Yep.
Nice lad. And he was boasting about the Jews are going to get wiped off the face of the earth and so on and so forth. Of course, the contrary happened, and he disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's still around, but he's a nice lad. And at that, I found that was interesting. God, how's that little country covered with all these people around him? That's only 13. So someone said, you need to read a book called Exodus by Leon Uris. Have you heard of it?
I haven't, no.
And it's a book about the Holocaust and about the survivors getting on the boat Exodus, which was trying to get into Palestine in 1946-47.
Yep.
And us, the British, stopped it. They eventually get in, and how Israel formed. And it goes back into describes various characters. It's a great book, probably my favourite book. And I thought, this is interesting, this. And it sort of escalated from that and moved on from there. So, yeah, I always had an interest in the Holocaust. My generation and yours grew up with Reach for the Sky, Damn Bastards, didn't we? Wooden Horse. We grew up with those things, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I think the war is always going to be a sort of a part of my back life, as it were. And this sort of followed onto it, and I just had an interest in it. And I understood Israel's situation is difficult at the moment. It really is, but I do understand where they're coming from. I can understand both sides of it as well, I think. So that just interested me, and so I did something I wanted to do.
I do. I interviewed a guy called Nigel Lithman, who was a judge from the old Navy. He's a Zionist. He's an unashamed Zionist. His uncle wrote the Israeli national anthem.
Right.
And he's very, very. His father was in the RAF during the Second World War, and he went out during the 6-Day War. He went out. He was an anaesthetist, and he went out and worked in the hospitals in Israel during the war. That short period, and he tells a fascinating story. And my other interest, and I'm fascinated by the Holocaust. I went to Orodor-sur-Glane, which is where the Germans. I don't know if you remember the program.
The village they flattened. The village. Yeah, I've been there.
World at War. Laurence Olivier starts the program, and they go into the village where they executed everyone and they burnt them alive and all that sort of stuff. I've never been to a concentration camp, but I just find the whole subject fascinating. My uncle was on one of the parties that liberated Belsen. He was a Royal Marine, and I think it was Belsen, but nevertheless, and he used to tell stories. And then latterly, we did some work with Robert Lind, and I've met Rob a few times, and we keep in touch. But his mum runs a charity called the 45A, and if I've got that wrong, I apologise, Angela, because I know you'll be listening. But I met 3 survivors from the camps, and these were young men when they came to the UK after the Second World War, and they went to Windermere originally, and then they ended up in Essex.
Yeah.
And so they went to a place called Holmhurst, which is a beautiful house in Loughton. And that's where, and I'm just absolutely captivated by the whole thing. Or have you been to the camps out in Poland? And
yeah, I've been to Auschwitz a couple of times. I've also been to most of the camps, or a good many of them in Europe. Belsen, I spent a week there last April. I was invited to the liberation ceremony, which they hold every year. I got invited over there by some of the staff and spent a week there walking round. because it's a massive camp, and with the idea of perhaps doing some work on that in that respect. I've got a book out, which I think you know that, don't you?
No.
No, I thought you did. When I did my doctorate, I met a BBC journalist who covered the war crimes trials in the 90s. My book's in 2 parts, and my thesis was a BBC journalist who covered the trials in the 1990s. I'll explain a bit more in depth about that, Paul, because it tends to be a bit complex. And he suggested we wrote a book, and we published it in October. And we're now touring around giving talks to institutions, universities, and so on about it.
Fantastic. And what is your book called, sir?
It's called Safe Haven. Let me just get it, and I'll read out the exact words for you. Wrong. There it is.
Safe Haven. Fantastic.
Safe Haven, and it is, I'll get this right, the United Kingdom's investigation into Nazi collaborators and the failure of justice.
And was there a failure of justice?
Well, there's 2 parts to it. There's the 1945 team that was produced or formed that dealt with the Belsen trial and the trials relating to the camps predominantly that we liberated.
Yes.
And then in the 1990s, this is where it gets, I think, quite interesting. I didn't know there was a 1990s war crimes team in the Metropolitan Police. And you talked about talking to the Deputy Chief Constable of Essex recently. It's not a former Met man, was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably the same guy. He didn't know either, if it's the same person. And so did others of my colleagues as well, senior colleagues didn't know. And they did very well. It's very difficult to investigate murders that happened 40 odd years ago. There's no forensic witnesses, not necessarily the best because of the language and all the other issues that surrounds it. So they did get a conviction, whereas the Canadians, the Australians and the New Zealanders also had teams running at the same time. They didn't get a conviction at all. But it's got to be pointed out that they were after not Germans living in England. How it came about was at the end of the Second World War, we prosecuted primarily Germans. Nuremberg was the head of the Nazi party, as you know. And then there was subsequent trials all around the place, and they highlighted on the Germans doing the things they did. And when it all finished in the late 40s, the Russians were still trying to prosecute people from the east, because during the war, when the Germans went into Russia and into Poland, into the east, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, the local population was certainly involved in the Holocaust with the Germans. You're probably aware of that, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
They did not do it by themselves, and the distinction must be made between concentration camps and extermination camps, the 2 different things. The concentration camps, such as Belsen and others in the West, were primarily transit or holding camps. They weren't designed to exterminate and kill people. The ones in the East, Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Chelmsford, Belzec, were designed to specifically kill people. The final solution. Can you believe that? Designed to kill people. And these camps wouldn't have been put where they were and succeeded to the level they did without the help of the indigenous population.
Of course.
Who were quite happy in a lot of cases to help. A lot of the killing was done by these guys. Now, come 1943, the war was beginning to change. Russia was beginning to get more powerful, beginning to see the light, working their way back towards the German army, who were getting pushed back towards Germany. So these Eastern people, soldiers, a lot of them were policemen, that helped the Nazis out, told them where the Jews were being kept, because they knew them, because they went to school with them, so they knew them. These things, what do we do? If we stay here, we'll get topped by the Russians. So they went with the Germans. Of course, they realised by about 44, 45, we ain't going to win this. Why don't we cross over and join the Allied armies who by then invaded northern France, June 44. So they did, because Europe was in a right mess at the end of the war, and all these people were scattered around, all these displaced persons. So some of them came to England, and some went to Canada, some went to Australia, some went to New Zealand, some went to Scotland. And we let thousands in. We let 200,000 people in, because we needed manpower, if I can use the word man, or power, to do the fields, do the hospitals and so on, which the Windrush became ultimately, didn't. That's what it was about, wasn't it, to get labour in?
Yep.
Yeah, because we were short of manpower, if you wish. And this preceded it. And the system was basically, a couple of people were put in a church hall. They had half an hour for each person. quick question there. What did you do during the war? I was in the Allied Army. I was in the Polish Army. Yeah, okay. Do you involve the Nazis? Oh, no. You can just see, okay, thanks very much. Clear off, you're in. And that was it. It was basic. Most of them were decent people who did the right thing, but not all of them. And the Russians kept on asking to extradite some of these people. And they had a very good system and a very good team set up during the war called the Extraordinary State Commission into Fascist Crimes and so on. And they had all this stuff and they wanted to extradite. We didn't have any extradition treaty with Russia, so we ignored it. Come the mid 80s, 86, there's an MP called Greville Janner. You know the name?
Yes, sir.
Sadly, his name became associated with something which we talked about earlier. He was never convicted of that. That's not what I want to talk about. But he did a lot of good for the Holocaust. He was a Jewish MP, and he'd been a war crimes investigator at the end of the Second World War. He fell into it. And he knew that in Los Angeles, the guy who succeeded Simon Wiesenthal, who was the Nazi hunter,
Yes.
a guy by the name of Ephraim Zurov, who's still around, who was very diligent Jewish Israeli war crimes investigator, was the head of the Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. And he gave the UK consulate, a list of 17 names of Eastern European Nazis, collaborators who were living in Great Britain, 3 in Scotland, I think, 14 in England, who were war criminals. This was thrown away, Don't do it, Russia, not interested. Janner got to hear of this, asked the Foreign Office, and the Foreign Office said, well, nothing to do with us. He kept on, asked it in the House of Commons. He was a backbench MP, but an MP for years, and he managed to persuade other MPs to join and create a cross-party team in war crimes. And he had Merlin Rees, who's the former Home Secretary, highly respected on both sides of the House, and other MPs from the Tory Party, from the Labour Party, Lib Dems, and an independent, all respected senior MPs, moderate, decent MPs. And they persuaded the Home Secretary, Douglas Hurd, and he said, OK, we'll have an investigation. And they got the former Director of Public Prosecutions, Thomas Hetherington, and the Scottish equivalent, William Chalmers, because the Scottish law is different, as you know, to do a report on the background and the war crimes and all the way through. It's a wonderful report. Took a year, and in 1989 or whatever it was eventually passed. The recommendation was legislation should be passed to prosecute people who've come to this country, living over here, who committed crimes committed in Germany or German occupied territories during the Second World War. Simple as that. And trying to get through Parliament was difficult, but they did it through the use of the Parliament Act, which is relevant now with Rwanda. I'm not going to discuss that, if you don't mind. And they got it through. And a team was formed from the Metropolitan Police. It was done on a Detective Chief Superintendent, a very senior Detective Chief Superintendent, whose contacts got the team together he wanted. And they did prosecute one person, or two. One was convicted, and the other one, he sadly didn't make it because he had Alzheimer's. And it lasted till 1999, and then it folded. And that's what we wrote about, and also the 1945 team, because that was a lot of my research. They put the book together, and we published it on the 5th of October.
Oh, fantastic. And where are you doing your tour?
Well, we went to Huddersfield and Leeds last week, universities. We did a presentation at the Imperial War Museum because I'm a volunteer there.
Oh.
I volunteer there 1 day a week in the Holocaust galleries. And we did a launch was at the University College London, because through university I've got contacts. You get to know people. I've got contacts. Where we did one at Sussex University, and we're doing one at the Wiener Library, which is the Jewish library in Russell Square, which is a Jewish library based there, which our university, Royal Holloway, has an association with. And we're trying to go over to America as well, but that's the next stage, Paul.
Well, I was at the Imperial War Museum, not last Wednesday, the Wednesday before. Were you doing a talk there then? Or were you?
Yes. That was my talk, yeah.
Not down with a feather, because I saw that.
Yeah.
I didn't put the two together, and I apologise, but I will come up on it. So you're there on a regular basis? I
go most Wednesdays, yeah. Yeah. And I do Holocaust research as a volunteer.
Fascinating. I might bring Angela Cohen, Rob's mum, up with me one evening, because her family had been in the camps, and
I know
she's.
that.
You do? Oh,
I saw the Rob Rinder program, and I was quite conscious of. He, in fact, was the guest of honour for the Flying Squad reunion recently. Rob Rinder was, and he was brilliant.
Really?
I bet he was great. I was never on the Flying Squad, but I'd imagine he'd be a brilliant speaker. I'm sure, and he was terrific. I'm certain of it.
He is such a gentleman, and
yeah, I'm sure
he's so funny, very articulate, well read, and yeah, I've had the pleasure of being in his company a few times, and he's a really, really nice guy. And as I say, if it hadn't been for Robert Rinder, there's a couple of things wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have got involved in the TV stuff, and we wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have done some other bits and pieces as well. So, in fact, if it hadn't been for Robert Rinder, I wouldn't have started doing this podcast.
Wouldn't you?
Well, because I did a TV series with him as part of the team, which was published here and published out in the States. And we were talking, and he said, "Look, just do it. Just do it." And I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "No, just do it." So yeah, I've got a lot to thank him for. And he, as I say, he's very, very good, very funny. What happens next with you, though? I mean, I find the whole subject captivating, but what happens next?
Well, I'm 70 in a couple of weeks, thankfully in good health. Book's going well. I thought about writing perhaps another one. I don't know. There's a lot of work involved in getting it published, but having seen how it happens, you've got to know what you're doing. Have you ever published anything before?
No, but I have got into writing things for television. So no, I've never published it, but I don't think I'm bright enough to write a book, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I think I've got a book in me, but I'm not very, I struggle with grammar and whatever. So it's not I don't know, it's something I'd like to do, but I've never sort of got round to it.
What do you do for the television then, Paul? Do you do scripts or?
So I write projects. So I put the project together. So I could say I want to do a project on the Holocaust, and this is what we're going to do. And and I'll get 4 or 5 people that are part of the team, and I'll then prepare it, and then I'll deliver it to the TV company, and then they put it forward for commissioning, as they call it.
Right.
So it could be around war crimes. I mean, I find your subject absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it certainly is. It just sort of fitted me in as an individual, having been in the police, having done law, and just seeing how it was done and so on. And I've read a lot of the papers. Yeah, it was a very interesting subject. There's a lot more to it, and I've been very fortunate to be able to be privy to all of it as well.
Have you been to Israel?
Yes, I have.
And
did some research at Yad Vashem.
Sorry,
did some research at Yad Vashem. That's the museum in Israel, in Jerusalem.
Right. And how did you find that?
Jerusalem was fascinating. We went there in 2016 when Donald Trump had just won the election. On the day we were actually in the museum, it came over on our phones that Trump had won the election, and they were very pleased about it. They really were. Yeah, it was really, really, really interesting. We went did all the old biblical sites and so on, Galilee. Jerusalem and Tel Aviv were fascinating. Seeing these 18-year-olds look like kids with guns walking around, and you go into a bar and there'd be 4 or 5 people sitting there with machine guns because they're in the military. And they were so patriotic and so much believed in their country. Most of them did. Talking to some of them, they believed in their existence. And I think they will protect that I think that's obvious, isn't it? They will protect that to the nth degree. Yep. Do you get that impression as well?
Yeah, I interviewed a former Lieutenant Colonel, Zarit Sahavi, a couple of weeks ago, and she lives in Galilee. And she was saying, peace and harmony is there. It's there. She lives in a multicultural, diverse part of Israel, but she also lives 9 kilometers from the Lebanese border, and there's 200,000 missiles pointing across the border to someone else. And it's the same with the Ukraine. If the Ukrainians don't stand up against Putin, that's even bigger problem to us, because it'll just railroad in the same way that Hitler moved through the countries. I could see Putin trying to do the same.
Yes, I can see that.
It's it's a very, very complex, the whole world situation, and then go even deeper and you look at the Taiwanese issue with the Chinese, and it's just, but the Chinese are smart. They're not going to want to get involved in a war because it's about pounds, shillings, and pence, and they don't want to be fighting anybody.
No, I think you're right there. The four countries: Iran, China, North Korea, and Russia, axis of evil, if you wish. I don't think any of them really wants to take the United States and the West on. I think what happened in Ukraine, the support Ukraine have got, not manpower, but in military hardware, which could be increased. Russia doesn't fancy that at all because they know what would happen if they tried.
Yeah,
and I think we just realise even more how important the United States are to us. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that Putin is going to wish he hadn't got involved in this.
I think you're right. He thought he was going to walk through in 2 weeks, didn't he? He'd be done.
And
it didn't work.
No, there was resolve within the Ukraine, and I've met some great Ukrainians since, and they're not going to back down either. No. So, my big concern is that Putin will be on his deathbed and he'll have the ability to cause absolute chaos globally by one stupid act. But hopefully somebody will stop him before he does that.
I like to think that there will be I think by the end of the year, I think there'll be some form of negotiated peace. It may mean Ukraine giving up part of the Eastern Bloc giving up Crimea and retaining the rest. That could well be an answer to that. I think it will be. And I have to say that the possibility of Donald Trump being elected as president fills me with horror. But under the circumstances, I felt America was safer when Trump was president.
I agree.
I much as I don't like what he does or what he stands for, but I just felt America was safer.
Yeah, and I think world peace, ironically, is safer as a direct result of him being the president, because he wouldn't stand for this nonsense. No. He would just, and I think if he comes in as president and they're still fighting in Israel, there will be an escalation in the Middle East. I think that could be a problem. But no, it's sad but very interesting times ahead. Who have you written the book with?
The guy called John Silverman, who is a BBC journalist.
Right.
Who I met when I was doing my research, and he covered these trials, the 1990s trials I mentioned earlier, for the BBC. So he does know his way around that. And even the jury for the successful conviction went to Lithuania, I think it was, to see the site, and he actually went with them because he was part of the journalists. So his knowledge of it was quite in depth. So between us, it balances out very well.
I remember those trials now because was there a Canadian as well recently, and they said that he's got Alzheimer's, or so. I say recently, I mean within the past 5 or 6 years. But I do remember in the back of my mind that there were trials, and somebody in Scotland was convicted, etc., etc.
No one in Scotland was. No, they didn't even get a charge in Scotland, and that annoyed the Americans for political reasons. The only charge was 2 charges in England. One was convicted, and the other one was not because of Alzheimer's. Canadians ran a few trials and never got beyond the early stages. And when I did my research, I contacted all the various members of all the various squads around the world, traced them all. That was good fun doing that. And speaking,
I bet it was. I mean, keeping in mind that we've still got World War II veterans that are, they're late 90s, early 100s now. Yeah. Does that mean that there are still Nazis around that were?
Right. The answer to that is yes, because if you're 18 in 1945, you'd now be 96, 97. And the only country in Europe that still openly seeks war criminals is Germany.
Right.
Believe it or not. But actually that makes sense, doesn't it? Because they've gone the other way. And they have an office in Ludwigsburg near Stuttgart, which we went to, met the guy there. And he was telling us about cases, and every now and then you get a conviction for somebody, and the law's been changed. There was a guy convicted who was a guard at a concentration camp. I think it could have been some near Stuttgart, who, because he had an involvement, he didn't pull the trigger, but he had an involvement in the Holocaust and in genocide. That was enough. So the law was changed. That's a stated case if you wish, an authority. If you were involved, you were guilty. And they prosecuted a woman who was the commandant's secretary, and she used to type out the lists, and they convicted her.
Wow.
Of genocide. Yeah. So, and they're still seeking, but you won't get many convictions now, not in 97. The trials were taken one day a week, because of health, and they were being rolled in on beds and so on. But they did it, which I think is tremendous.
I interviewed Dave Phillips, who was a beefeater at the Tower of London. He's retired from there now, and he worked at Spandau Prison when Hess was held there. Because when Hess came to the UK, landed in Scotland, or parachuted in Scotland, he was held at the Tower for 3 days. Right. And that's another fascinating story, because he sat at the Nuremberg trials, if I remember rightly, convicted, but of course he didn't go to the gallows because he hadn't had that level of involvement.
No, he was lucky. He got out when he did, and he put on the Nut and Gut Act, didn't he? Which some people think it was false, but it worked for him, and he spent the rest of his life in prison, didn't he? And he died there as well.
Yeah,
suicide in the end, didn't he?
Well, there's a lot of speculation about his demise. His demise took place when the French took over the running of the prison, because it was split between the French, the Russians, the British, and the Americans, if I remember rightly.
Berlin, yeah.
French took over. He died, and within days, weeks, they flattened the whole place, completely flattened it. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting subject, sir. Well, look, I've really enjoyed today, and I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time. But before we conclude this interview, I'm going to give you the opportunity to add, alter, or correct anything that you've said.
That's familiar, isn't it? End of a statement under caution. I don't think so.
It's lovely talking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for giving me the time, the opportunity to do so.
And I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Paul Mulleary's X-Job Downloaded. Please like, follow, and share with all your friends. Your support is absolutely invaluable and makes a real difference to me as a podcaster. Thank you.